to present. It's my first time presenting. I've been to a few of these before, so it's kind of cool to be on the other side. So I'll get started. So a little introduction. I didn't have an introduction slide, but for me, I'm Anthony Castano. I've been in IT for 7 years, so a little bit of time. I'm responsible at my company, Spallglass, for incident response, threat hunting, security design, security awareness training. Pretty much, I'm really the only security guy there. So it's fun. It keeps me on my toes. It's fun. So today we'll be going over how we stopped session theft, and it's not perfect, but it has helped our company out a lot. So we'll be going over this, and then I put the subtext in there too. Your MFA is futile if I have your cookie. So we'll be getting into that here shortly. So first, we'll be asking a few questions just to kind of get, if you guys want to go ahead and pull out your phone and join, it's anonymous. It's not going to be like, you know, you got fished. I got them all, the security. You can trust me. So if you're welcome to do this. We're just going to do a couple like questions here just to get a kind of gauge for the audience. All right, cool. We got some thumbs up. All right, let's continue. Malware. All right. Let me know if you need to go back. So the first one, job title. So what's your job title? Student, talker, you professional, you're senior cybersecurity analyst. I'm just a cybersecurity analyst. I don't know if I mentioned that, but I've been working here for a little while. Okay, interesting. Recent grad, IT support, nice. Okay, principal, sales engineer. So a mix of different people here. Interesting. So I'll get a little technical. I'll try to do it overview as well, but we'll continue. So in terms of company, is there someone dedicated to some of your company who does cybersecurity? Or is it more of like, it's just something that's IT's responsibility? Oh, IT does this. So that's their thing. We don't do that. Okay, got some good ones. Yes, so it looks like we do have quite a bit. So this is good. All right, let's continue here. And then this one is the last one for this section is, how often are you seeing phishing attacks from compromised business partners? And if you're like a student, or you may not have access to some of these types of things, or may not know, that's okay. It's normal. Cool. Weekly. Yeah, wow. Yeah, it's up there. I know for us, we have it weekly. We work with a lot. So we're a construction company, so we work with probably 1,000 plus subcontractors that have emails, and it could be big multinational companies, or it could be someone working out of his truck as an electrician. So it's really small up to really big. So it's pretty cool to see. Now, going into a story. So this is an example of what we had one time. So we had one of our project managers on their computer. They're working, doing their job, right? They're out there to build buildings. They're not necessarily out there to, be the most cyber safe, right? So he's checking his email. He looks. He says, "Oh, wait a minute! Look, I have this email. It's from Brandon. I had to take out some of this." He's like, "Oh yeah, look, he sent me a OneNote file. I need to sign in. He's probably trying to send me an invoice or something like that. This is completely legitimate. I'm gonna sign right in." And so he goes to the site. This is the site that's there. You might be able to spot some different things, but if you're in your day-to-day work, and this is some things that, as security, especially myself, a security professional, is like, well, if you're working every day, you're not necessarily going to look at all the signs of like what could be dangerous, right? So up here, you may see that maybe it is something, maybe it's not. So, and one of the other things too is it looks exactly like our Microsoft sign-in, which is pretty scary. Minus the top, right? If you were to tell me, if I didn't look at the top, I'd say, yeah, this is our Microsoft sign-in, like log right in. And so let's continue. After they had signed in, they put in their email, password, as well as their second factor of authentication. And there was a bunch of different logins, like probably a handful of logins across the US, different data centers, different IPs. Like, what the? Okay, that's a little strange. That's weird. I was getting alerts on my side. This is how I was looking. Like, what is this guy doing? What is using a VPN or something to connect to all these different data centers? That's really strange. And this was me after realizing, I'm like, oh, well, I have the policy. So all those sign-ins that were attempted failed. And I'll go over how we set that up here. Not too much into the weeds, but I'll kind of explain a bit on what I did, because it does take quite a lot. For the experience, yeah, just curious if you guys have experience with session stealing attacks, or you may not necessarily have. I know there was quite a few people that didn't have visibility into that, but if you know, let's see here, we have a lot that have seen session stealing attacks. Okay, place. So yeah, it looks like there's quite a bit of people who have seen it targeting the company. Some maybe not. Okay, man, lucky. We get a lot. We get a ton. And then emails report consistently. That's good. We have process review, unusual sign-in. That one's a big one too. I'll be going over those in the key takeaways. So the problem going forward, part of the problem is looking at the attacker's lens of view. I know we talked about curiosity and seeing how attackers can get into these different accounts. So the one big thing that I've seen is these guys are just renting out to the phishing as a service. So there's a lot more out there where they'll just pay like $350 for like a month and hit a ton of people with these phishing kits. And these phishing kits have a lot of features. They're like, oh, look, we have 2FA bypass. We have, password collection. We'll send you web links to your Discord or Telegram or whatever you need, right? So it makes it really easy for these guys to get in and start doing these malicious types of attacks. Continue. Yeah, 2FA cookie harvesting. The status of their phishing campaigns. What's the status? Did it just sent? Did it get delivered? Did they steal some? So it's pretty crazy. $350 a month is not a lot if you're hitting thousands of people at once. The other part is the defense. So understanding the problem on the defense side, it's hard because in my experience with Microsoft, they do have a lot of delayed alerting. We're Microsoft Shop, and sometimes they tell us within an hour that someone is signing in weird. There's a bunch of risky sign-ins. Sometimes they tell us like a day or two later. Like, I could have known this a day or two later. I don't know what was going on beforehand. And unfortunately, the third-party security is kind of the same because they're ingesting the logs. If you ever point it to like a third-party SOC or SIEM, they might not get all the information. I kind of dug into the weeds, and it's plus or minus. So really, what I want to do is make my own SIEM, and we do it outsourced today, but it is what it is. There's 2FA is really not enough anymore. So this is for certain second factors. So for like SMS, for voice, for like authenticator apps, it's not enough anymore. I did one yesterday. They're actually doing the authenticator app, like where you do the 2 codes, where it's like passwordless. They're getting through. They're adding new features every day for these phishing kits, which is pretty scary. Another one, email security. Our email security failed to pick up that phishing email. It was coming from a trusted vendor who they had previously contacted. So it's hard for emails to see that nuance in those situations. The firewall, we had the firewall at the job site at the time. It actually didn't have the policy set to enabled. Otherwise, it would have blocked that domain. So unfortunately, that was another hole. And then lastly, security awareness training. So letting our team members know, like, hey, we shouldn't be clicking on these types of emails is pretty important as well. So there's a lot of holes that can go through, and this one just aligned perfectly where it just hit all of them to where they actually stole, or at least tried to steal, this person's token. So now talking about the solution. So there is a feature in Microsoft, it's called hybrid authentication. So, or hybrid join or authentication. So there's a lot of prerequisites going forward to enable it. And before you even enable it, there's a ton of things. So a few of the prerequisites: you need E3 license, you need the on-prem, I didn't put AD, but it's on-prem AD, you need Entra ID, and you also need the hybrid join devices specifically. It can't just be only on Entra or only AD joined. You do need, I prefer Chrome for Enterprise in terms of deploying this out, because by default, Edge supports returning the hybrid auth devices, but Chrome doesn't. You have to deploy some certain things, and that actually was a blessing in disguise for us as well. I'll go into that. And then third-party support is also good, because for some of the Entra ID apps that you authenticate with, they don't return the hybrid authentication, which I'm not sure why, but that's what they do. Hybrid join policy, and then exceptions policy. So you'll have your actual policy and then the exceptions. So in terms of the scope, we're targeting in this conditional access policy, it's kind of like a way to restrict certain things that they do on the IT side. Is you're going to want to include Windows, Linux, Mac OS, and also unknown devices. The things that are going to be out of scope for these are going to be Android and iOS devices, because those cannot be hybrid joined. So if you have those within the scope of the policy, they're all automatically going to get denied. So that is definitely a gap there. And this is the policy I was mentioning. So if you're interested in reading more about it, you can look it up, and it's saved me so much time and effort and stress. So that's the policy there. In terms of actually, after we implemented this policy, it stopped session stealing pretty much completely. There's still ways that you can steal sessions, obviously. There's always a way around controls. But for us specifically, it stopped a lot of these attacks, because in the previous example, they were logging into like a Linux VM or a Windows VM or a Mac VM from different locations, but those VMs were not hybrid joined. They were not authorized through us, essentially joined through IT first and then given to like the users and whatnot. So that's the way how we're filtering and preventing these types of sign-ins that attackers can't get in. When we implemented the change, a lot of the users didn't really notice it. The ones that did were using personal devices. So unfortunately, if you're using like a personal Windows or Mac OS device or Linux device to log into your work email after implementing this policy, it won't work. So we did have a few, so most people didn't mind that change. There were still a few. And another thing that really was eye-opening was reducing the risk of info stealers. So something that I didn't necessarily even think about was, okay, well, if I'm an attacker, why do I have to go and breach the work computer, like the corporate device, versus instead of just, oh, well, let me just take their personal device. It's a lot easier. It doesn't have EDR, doesn't have any security policies, nothing that prevents it from being taken over. And if they're signed into their work email on there, oh, I'll just swipe the cookie, replay it on another device, and then boom, they're in. So that was another thing that was pretty huge. And even after deploying restrictions to like Chrome for Enterprise and things like that, where the extensions were locked down, we didn't have our extensions locked down before. Boy, I'll tell you what, there was a lot of things that I was like, whoa, who's doing like DJing on their off time, like DJ extension or like anime extension? I'm like, what is this? I don't know what's going on. So that was a really big impact in going forward. In terms of key takeaways, one thing that I like to do, monitor a lot of the Entra ID risky sign-ins. This has definitely helped. And if you're not a Microsoft shop, then this won't necessarily help. But monitoring those risky sign-ins, those have been relatively timely for the most part. Not necessarily relying on third-party SOCs in terms of speed to get back to these or research these risky sign-ins. I want to do something custom. I haven't done it today, but that's something you can do. And these are all in least effort to most effort. You can do the geo and IP restrictions. So like, hey, only this account is logging in from this server at our colo or this location. Why does it need to log in and be allowed to log in anywhere across the world, or things like that? So you can do restrictions. Those will definitely help. At least be a tripwire as well too. If someone logs in somewhere else and it's like, wait a minute, how did they get in with the MFA password, but they're logging in from, like, I don't know, Russia or something? It's like, okay, well, we got to look at this real quick. That's not right. Limiting the browser extensions, like I mentioned, that was huge. There was a lot of shadow IT going on there. It was really strange. A lot of weird extensions, I'll tell you that. There are some other alternatives like risk-based reporting, but you do need additional licensing with Microsoft. And then lastly, the hybrid restriction. So having all those pieces in place, that's what I would recommend. Long-term, doing the hybrid restriction. And unfortunately, you can't, it depends on your environment. If you are fully cloud, it's a little bit harder to implement the hybrid because you do need on-prem AD for this to happen. So if you're both, it actually helps you a lot. In our case, it was already hybrid. We weren't fully AD, we weren't fully in the cloud, so it definitely helped out. In terms of, yeah, that's pretty much what I had. In terms of like alternate, this is my LinkedIn. In terms of other alternate methods that you could do, like for fully cloud, you could do like compliance policies, compliance. You could move to phishing resistant authentication. So like passkeys, I know the phishing kits don't necessarily support those today because it works different. You can do, phishing resistance, yeah, for those. For another thing about passkeys as well is passkeys are good because it protects against those phishing services, but they don't protect you against malware. So that's another thing too, is if some sort of malware gets on the device, well, I mean, they'll steal the session that way too. And then also, when I first deployed this policy, and it may be difficult if you want to go this route, I initially thought, well, let me just deploy this to admins or privileged users that we have. And our director at the time, I was talking to him about this and just bouncing ideas off of him. So he's like, why don't we just do this for everybody? I'm like, well, that's possible. It's going to take a lot more work, but it's definitely possible, and it'll make us a lot more secure. So today, this is for all of our users, or it's applied for the hybrid policy, not just admins. But if you are in that bind where it's like, well, man, this is going to take a lot of work, you can also do some of these restrictions or some of these policies and maybe just target towards admins or high-level users as well. That's pretty much all that I had. Let me see if I can keep going here. I just had some resources. If you're still on the Menti, you can click on them, I believe. But that's pretty much it. Do you have any questions, concerns?